Dana Milbank did a great piece on the Voice of America being dismantled. I mean, they're firing everybody. And here was the headline: Stalin, Mao, and Khomeini couldn't quell freedom's voice, but Trump did. The world's autocrats are doing somersaults about the silencing of the voice of America. It was on the air 8 weeks after Pearl Harbor, and it became instrumental in getting the word out from the American perspective. And it wasn't just to Europe. It was to Asia. It was all around the world. It was a critical link to an American perspective. And Adolf Hitler couldn't silence it, he notes here. Joseph Stalin and his successors, right up through Vladimir Putin, couldn't silence it. Mao Zedong and his successors, through Xi, couldn't silence it. Khomeini and the Ayatollahs couldn't silence it, but Donald Trump has just silenced the voice of freedom. For the first time since 1942, VOA has been taken off the air after Trump put virtually all of its 1,300 staff members on leave. The administration also shut down VOA's sister outlets, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and Radio Free Asia. The so-called beacon of freedom, VOA, has now been discarded by its own government like a dirty rag, said the Chinese Communist Party's international media outlet. They celebrated, essentially, the end of Voice of America. They call it a lie factory, the Communist International Media, Chinese Communist Party's media outlet, does. It celebrated the silence of this lone voice for truth in China. Quote, from smearing human rights in China, Xinjiang, to hyping up disputes in the South China Sea, from supporting Taiwan independence forces to backing Hong Kong rioters, from fabricating the so-called China virus narrative to promoting the claim of China's overcapacity, almost every malicious falsehood about China has VOA's fingerprints all over it. That's what they said, the Communist Party. And it concurred with Elon Musk's view that VOA is, quote, just radical left crazy people talking to themselves. That's what the Chinese government is doing. They're quoting Elon Musk about Voice of America. And it goes on and on. And what Milbank's piece does is it just quotes the celebration that exists not only in China, but in Iran, where VOA is officially banned as an enemy broadcaster, they call it. And they celebrated the shutdown of VOA. In Russia also, they celebrate the demise of the VOA news outlet there. So combined with the Trump administration's canceling of most foreign aid, the silencing of Voice of America, which boasted a weekly audience of, anybody want to guess? 360 million people in nearly 50 languages, signals the complete surrender of U.S. soft power influence gained over decades using means other than warfare. We talk about soft power on the show all the time because I think it's so important, and this is part of it. You don't need to use guns and bombs. The influence of America, the influence of American, the precepts that are associated with American democracy, freedom, liberty, freedom of speech. These are things that may be vanishing now, but they really were a rallying cry for many, and it helped extend the reach of this country in a positive way, and VOA was part of it. So obviously USAID is a big part of it too, right? Making a difference with health and raising up so many of the communities worldwide that need help, and they get it from America. So I think it's a dark day when we dismantle yet another way in which the American perspective can be communicated to many parts of the world that have no way to hear it otherwise. Right-wing media is dominating the online space. They are on in sports, they are on in comedy, they're on, in other words, in non-political spaces and in purely political spaces. They have an oversized volume within the online universe. This from Media Matters. And an increasing number of Americans get their news from online news shows, of course, and streamers. And so when you look at that media ecosystem, it is extraordinary that the size of these shows, podcasts, streams, other long-form audio, video content regularly posted online, they say, reflects a right-wing bent. They did an analysis based on 320 online shows with a right-leaning or left-leaning ideological bent. And they found that right-leaning online shows dominate the ecosystem with substantially larger audiences on both politics and news shows, and even supposedly non-political shows that were determined after they looked at them and listened to them that they platformed ideological content or ideological guests, those connected to some right-wing ideology.
I thought the media was controlled by the left-wing people. No? Isn't that what they tell us? Oh, it's all the left wing. It's not, don't they even say it's the Jewish people? Oh,
it is it's a common notion. Kim's right that the mainstream media leans left. I don't know what the mainstream media is. If you talk about legacy media now, maybe the ABC, NBC, CBSs of the world, that might be. I think there's certainly. I think they try to avoid, or at least the appearance. They try to avoid the appearance of leaning one way or another. But they've certainly been cowed by the current administration. We've told you, and you know how ABC tapped out, CBS tried to tap out, then they couldn't because Trump increased the size of that lawsuit, $20 billion on the Kamala Harris thing. But you've seen the way that the Washington Post, under the control of Bezos, have tapped out on the opinion pieces that relate to Donald Trump, mostly the endorsement. Similarly at the LA Times. So even legacy media, I think it's hard to find how they lean left. I think they're trying to avoid the ire of this administration. But this is just interesting because they found 320 online shows, 191 right-leaning, 129 left-leaning, that were active last year and covered news and politics and had related guests. They had 50, this is a wild stat. These shows had at least 584.6 million total followers and subscribers. So this is an immense group of people. And as we've said before, it's increasingly how people not only get news, but how people decide on what policies and what parties they even link themselves to. They found substantial asymmetry across platforms. Right-leaning online shows had at least 480.6 million total followers, nearly 5 times as many as left-leaning. Across platforms, YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, Kick, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, right-leaning online shows accounted for roughly 82% of the total. Left-leaning online shows had 104 million followers and subscribers across the 8 platforms, nearly 5 times fewer. 9 out of the 10 online shows with the largest followings were right-leaning. Again, 9 out of the 10. More than 197 million people listened to those shows. The only left-leaning show among the top 10 was What Now with Trevor Noah. It has 21 million total followers.
Wow.
I don't even know What Now. Have you heard that ever? I don't know it.
Clearly we're missing out.
I love Trevor Noah, but again, otherwise, the other 9 in the top 10 were right-leaning shows. So there is a new battle that it's funny that Trump rails about mainstream media. Trump was saying at the Justice Department, he did it on Friday after we got off the air. He was going after MSNBC, and he's naming people by name. I'm Mark Elias among them, and I think Andrew Weissman might be one of them. These are people who show up. These are lawyers who show up, and some of them have podcasts. I think Elias has his own podcast. And I mention it because he's calling them names and saying that they're involved in criminal activity, and these are political efforts to undermine his presidency, and this stuff is illegal. He's saying this at the Justice Department. And I find that to be yet another plank in the platform that he's building toward total authoritarianism, right? Cow the media. And he's done it in part through the courts. But now it appears that, he's very much, it would seem, as he makes these comments at the Justice Department, sicking his Justice Department on journalists. But, dude, you control the online space. 9 out of 10 of the most powerful podcasts, the biggest audience, is controlled by the right-leaning podcasts. I just gave you the stats. So this is the reality of today, that legacy media is increasingly irrelevant. And again, I don't want to overstate it. I mean, you still have like 8 million viewers, I think, on World News Tonight and all the rest. But Lester Holt's got his thing, and isn't Lester Holt leaving NBC's? Yeah. In any case, all I'm trying to say is that the clear trend is toward the independent, we'll call it, media platforms, and those are dominated by the right. And so with that, you have an America that is getting its information from the right. And so a lot of what's happening is actually going to jibe with what the right wing wants, and the audience is increasingly getting their facts filtered through what they want. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and it's concerning. I mean, it's really concerning. I mean, the left needs to find their people. The left needs to find, David Pakman, who was here yesterday. I mean, more like him. The power. I mean, Midas Touch is a great example of a network that's doing well. It's punching through, right? I mean, they've surpassed Joe Rogan, at least in clicks. I don't know about downloads or whatever, but they've overtaken Rogan. And so Midas Touch Network does some great stuff. Our friend Anthony Davis is on Midas Touch Network. His stuff is great. They have lawyers on who are really terrific. And so that stuff will get through, but it's just being completely overshadowed by the right on the online space. So that's worth noting, and it's worth knowing about. And as I say, it's worth addressing. I do think you need to support the left-leaning or centrist. Perhaps you see yourself as a moderate. I mean, moderate may be considered left. I mean, the Overton window is always changing, but I do feel as though you need to support those shows that you believe in.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.